Vamos a dar inicio a la cuarta sesión con la temática temas relacionados con la imputación y la edición de datos. Tenemos dos presentaciones, una, la introducción al modelo de record linkage de Brenda Betancourt de la Duke University, y la segunda es combinando registros y encuestas por muestreo para mejorar la calidad, un caso latinoamericano de errores de cobertura. Voy a hacer la presentación de los dos ponentes de una vez para que podamos pasar de un lado a otro, y yo lo que quisiera, si así lo están de acuerdo, que se hagan las dos presentaciones y al final hacemos preguntas y respuestas sobre los temas. Brenda Betancourt es asociada, no tengo que presentarla porque es una mujer y un caballero, es asociada postdoctoral en el Departamento de Ciencias Estadísticas en la Universidad de Duke. Actualmente está trabajando en el desarrollo de nuevos modelos bayesianos y algoritmos para la resolución de entidades con aplicaciones sobre violaciones de derechos humanos y estadísticas sociales, entre otros. Es originaria de Colombia, donde obtuvo su licenciatura en Estadística por la Universidad de Bogotá. Su maestría la obtuvo en Estadística por la Universidad de Puerto Rico, Río Piedras, y luego se mudó a California para obtener su PhD en Estadística en la Universidad de California, Santa Cruz, donde trabajó en métodos y algoritmos para modelar y predecir redes dinámicas. Nos acompañan también Anders y Britt Wallgren, quienes tienen una formación como profesores en estadística de la Universidad de Estocolmo y en la Universidad de Linköping en Suecia. Han realizado investigaciones en estadísticas basadas en registros en Statistic Sweden y en la Universidad de Örebro. Por muchos años trabajaron en el Departamento de Investigación y Desarrollo de Statistic Sweden, sobre todo métodos de encuestas utilizados para producir estadísticas basadas en registro. Desde 2011, y afortunadamente han visitado muchos países, entre ellos México en varias ocasiones, en América Latina y el Caribe, para dar cursos sobre el uso de registros administrativos con fines estadísticos y discutir con sus colegas de los Institutos Nacionales de Estadística cómo el Sistema Nacional de Estadístico puede beneficiarse a partir de los registros administrativos. La verdad, tenemos excelentes ponentes y les pido a todos pues, su atención. Brenda, tienes la palabra hasta por 25 minutos para poder dejar 10 minutos para las conversaciones. Gracias.
Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I'm going to be giving an introduction to record linkage approaches. I feel like my talk should have been before Rebecca's talk. This is going to be a very basic introduction to it, so it's going to be painless, I hope. The outline of my presentation, I'm going to just give an overview of record linkage. I'm going to talk a little bit about data preparation, then go very superficially into deterministic and probabilistic matching, and then talk a little bit about the computational challenges of record linkage. So you already know what record linkage is. These are just techniques for integration of multiple data sources that capture complementary information on the same population. You can have duplicated records in a database that correspond to corrupted, degraded, or noisy representation of the same entity. So in the Syrian case that Becca talked about, they have the same information in the entities, so it was just basically a deduplication type of record linkage. There are other applications when you actually have different information in the databases, complementary information, and you just want to merge them to be able to use that full information. So record linkage is particularly difficult when we don't have unique identifiers across databases, right? or in cases where we have anonymized data. This happens often in many applications, but I'm gonna just talk a little bit about one of them. This is common in public health. So this is just gonna talk about HIPAA. This is a Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. This is a law that was created to protect people from losing their health insurance due to, for example, pre-existing conditions. One of the objectives of this law was also to reduce costs and administrative burdens by using standard electronic forms where all the information of the patients are stored. So this is just electronic health records, EHR, that's how they're usually known. And another objective of this law is to protect the privacy of individually identifiable health information. So there are many entities that are covered by HIPAA, hospitals, pharmacies, and so if you want to combine information from these different sources, it can be pretty hard because they don't want to release maybe sensitive information about your patients. And so this basically goes against the purpose of what record linkage is when you would want to actually identify a person uniquely, okay? So just talking about how hard record linkage can be. So this is what I was just talking about. It's pretty tied to data confidentiality. You're gonna have limited access to unique identifiers, for example, social security numbers, names, addresses, so that can make that process really hard. And there has been a lot of discussion recently about kind of like the trade-off between disclosure risk of sensitive patient information, for example, and data utility for statistical purposes, and in this case, for example, record linkage purposes. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is record linkage feasibility. Naturally, if you want to do, if you want to get reliable and accurate results after a record linkage process, that's going to depend greatly on the quantity and the quality of the identifying information that you have across, that overlap across your databases. Sometimes it's not feasible when the number of entities or unique records that you have is small compared to the number of records in all the databases, or if the discriminatory power of the identifiers is low. So what does that mean? For example, between sex and month of birth, the month has a higher discriminatory power because you have more categories, right? So that will tell you more. The feasibility of record linkage is a hard problem in practice, and it's also a very hard problem from a theoretical point of view. There has been recent work on it from John et al. And Rebecca. They have papers that came out this year talking about this issue of record linkage feasibility. So even in cases where you have, like an ideal case, where you don't have, when you have enough discriminatory power, record linkage can be hard, but you have to add to that the identifying fields, if this happens often in many applications, can contain lies, omissions, typographical errors, or you may have out-of-date information. For example, addresses or phone numbers can change if people move or their name change because they got married. So those are things that you have to consider, for example, in cases where you're combining sources that have a temporal component to it, for example. Okay, so thinking that we can actually do record linkage and that is feasible, the first step should be data preparation. You need to clean and standardize your data. So the idea is to transform the linkage variables to the same format across data sources. So use the same case, strip content from all punctuation, leave all the features with the same length. For example, the date that I have there is all uppercase, no dashes, right? Identifiers can be parsed into separate pieces of information. If you have a date like that, what you would do is just to split in date, month, and year. And another recommendation is that if you have redundant information, if you were to have the zip code and the county, it would be best to not include both in the record linkage process because you may be overestimating the level to which two records agree if you do that. So between those two, it would be better to include the zip code because that's more informative, at least at the beginning. Okay, so the simplest thing that you can do for record linkage is just to do deterministic linkage. This is just where you compare pairs and you declare them a match only if they agree exactly in all the values that you're using for your linkage. Naturally, if you're going to do that, then the cleaning and standardization part is super important because if you have an example like that, when one is in capital letters and the other one is not, then it's going to say that it's not a match. This type of deterministic linkage is better to use on high quality data if you have high discrimination and basically error-free information. This is very rare in practice. So usually what people do is just to do some type of probabilistic approach that leads to an approximate matching, not just exact matching. Deterministic linkage can be performed in a single step, or you could also use an iterative strategy. For example, you could match first on zip code if you had this redundant information for exact matches, and then if you see records that agree on anything else, on everything else, but for some reason they don't match on the zip code, then you could do a second step and match on county, for example. If you do that, then it's not a deterministic linkage anymore, it's not exact, it would be an approximate approach. But it's a way of maybe using redundant information to account for some errors that you may have in your fields. So this is just an example, and a super easy example of an iterative deterministic linkage in a very ideal case where you have a lot of information. So you could do, in step one, you're going to say that two records match on, must match on social security number and one of the following criteria: first and last name, or last name, month of birth and sex, or first name, month of birth and sex. Okay? And then in a second step, for example, if you're accounting for missing data or errors, if the social security number is missing or does not match, then the two records have to match on first and last name, month of birth, sex, and one of the following, either 7 to 8 digits of the social security number, that's out of 9, or 2 or more of the following: year of birth, date of birth, middle initial, or date of death. Okay, so this is obviously an ideal case where you have many information to identify your records uniquely. So again, this is a two-step deterministic process that is going to transform into an approximate matching. Okay, we're not just matching exactly, which is more realistic than just doing that. Okay, so probabilistic linkage is just what I was doing before, just allowing fields to only be similar rather than just being exact duplicates one of the other. Most large-scale applications employ some level of approximate match between fields. What I'm going to do is to talk a little bit about techniques that you could use to find similarities between strings. That's usually the hardest part, like dealing with string data. So I'm going to talk about those techniques and just to do approximate matching. But there are other approaches, more sophisticated probabilistic strategies that take into account the discriminatory power of the fields and also the likelihood that two records are a true match. One of the most known approaches is the Felix-Sonter approach. This is for the case of two data files. So if you want to look into that, that's the reference for that. Okay, so how to compare strings? One of the most basic ways of doing that is using the Levenstein distance. This distance is basically computed as the minimum number of substitutions that are required to transform one string into another. For example, if we have the names Adam versus Alan, you're going to have to do 2 substitutions to go from one string to the other. So the Levenstein distance will be 2 in that case, and a normalized version is just 1 minus, there's a similarity measure, 1 minus the Levenstein distance over the maximum length of the string. So that's 4, the maximum length, so that would be a 0.5 similarity measure between these two names. That's the simplest one, but one of the most popular ones that I feel like many people use in practice is the Jarrow-Winkler similarity measure. The original Jarrow distance was computed as basically the number of character transpositions that you need to make to go from one string to the other. And the Jarrow-Winkler similarity measure is just a modification of this original Jarrow distance, where you give some weight to a common prefix of the strings. So 0.1 is just the original formulation that Jarrow-Winkler showed in his paper, and P is the number of first 4 characters that agree exactly. So you're giving some weight to the 2 strings having a common prefix. So for example, in Adam versus Alan, P will be only 1, because they only coincide on the first letter. They have to agree position by position, right? So it will be just 1. The Jarrow distance, or similarity measure, sorry, is 0.67, and the Jarrow-Winkler is 0.7, which is a little bit higher because they agree on the first letter. So these 2 similarity measures are best for short strings such as person names, but if you want to do, if you need to do something for longer or multi-word strings, then there is a technique that's called Q-grams that Becca already talked about. It's just basically like a sliding window of length Q over the characters of a string. So I have an example here of the 2-gram that Becca also gave. So for Adam versus Alan, we just have 5 2-grams, and a simple way of computing a distance or a similarity measure based on this would be to choose the number of matching Q-grams in the second string over the possible Q-grams. So it would be 1 over 5, that's the number of possible Q-grams. So the distance of those 2 would be 0.2 in this case, okay? So those are just super simple techniques, maybe for cases when you have millions of records and you can afford go fancier. So you can use those. The other thing that I want to talk about that Becca mentioned in a much higher level is hashing algorithms. These are algorithms that perform calculations on the binary code of the characters to generate a new value. So these are called usually hash code or hash tokens. And they're designed in a way that similar strings will produce exactly the same hash code. So once you do this process of hashing, what's going to happen is that your approximate matching is converted into a deterministic matching. The idea is you get your codes, and then you just match exactly after that. So one of the first hashing algorithms that appear and is like very used still is the soundex algorithm. This is an algorithm that generates a code that represents the phonetic pronunciation of a word. So it's pretty useful for cases when you have spelling variations of names. So the soundex code consists of a letter followed by 3 numerical digits. The letter is the first letter of the name, and then the digits encode the remaining consonants in the word. So consonants at a similar place of articulation share the same digit. For example, the consonants B, F, B, and V are encoded as the number 1. There are other rules. If you have 2 letters that have the same number, then you will just keep the first one. And there are many other rules like that. Obviously, you can find these already implemented in any software or SaaS. They're all there already. So with our example, the soundex code for Adam would be A350, for Alan, A450. And if you had John and John just spelled differently, you're going to get the code J500. So you will match exactly on that code later, okay? So that's on hashing. The other thing I wanted to mention is the problem of transitive equivalence. So it happens pretty much with any record linkage, not all of them, but these basic ones, and even with the Felix-Hunter approach, you can have, for example, we have 3 records here, A, B, and C. So you have your record linkage method that's going to tell you that A and B are a match because they agree on full name and phone number, okay? And then you're going to have records B and C that your algorithm is going to tell you that they're a match because they agree on full name and address. But records A and C, they don't agree because they only agree on full name. So this is a problem that these logical contradictions are common, happens no matter, I mean, depending on the method you use. But if you use something like this or Felix-Hunter, then you're going to have this issue. So what people do in practice is just use, just do a post-processing step, making sure to link records like this. And for example, here, A and B are already a match, B and C are already a match. So C would be called the transitive closure of A, because it's a record that was matched to A through to transitive linking, okay? So it's just another important step that you need to check that out after you do your record linkage process. Computational challenges, Becca talked about this a little bit too. These methods are usually just an all-by-all comparison, which is not very practical, especially if you have millions of records. Even if you have 2 small data sets, say 2 files, one of size 100 and then another of size 1,000 that you want to combine, then you have a comparison space of 100,000, right? So the common technique to make this more efficient is called blocking. This is used to reduce the comparison space to record pairs that meet certain basic criteria. One of the most popular is just called traditional blocking, where, for example, you look for matches on pairs that agree on, say, sex and month of birth. So that's going to reduce the space of matches that you have to look in your data. The records that do not meet the blocking criteria are going to be automatically classified as non-matches. So a caveat of that is that fields can be unreliable for many applications, and then when you do the blocking, you may be missing a bunch of matches, right? So you're going to have probably increased false negative rates. But, I mean, you're saving on computation, I guess. This is very application specific, right? If you understand well which errors are unlikely for a certain field or a combination of them, then that's a good tool because you know there are a combination of fields that can happen, so you can already took out many of your records, right? So that's pretty useful. And naturally, you would want to find fields that have very few errors or missing values as blocking variables. For example, in health data, it would be reasonable to block by clinical diagnosis, right? So just compare people that have the same disease. Drawbacks of this, it can happen that your blocks are still pretty big, right? So you're not getting much in terms of computational efficiency. If you block just by sex, for example, you're going to still have a bunch of comparisons to make. So there is a trade-off between the block sizes in terms of computational efficiency and the matches that you may be missing. So increase false negative rates. So that's a practical thing that you have to give some thought when you're doing this process. A fancier way of doing blocking, if you can afford that, would be cluster-based blocking. With traditional blocking, what can happen is, okay, you're blocking by, say, sex and month of birth, but then you could probably still see that are records there that are definitely not the same, corresponding to the same person, right? So it makes sense that if you make clusters based on certain distance measures, you're going to have in the same cluster people that are very similar. So that's going to give you good candidate pairs for your final matching. So if you can afford to do that, some of the most common methods are threshold nearest neighbor. Just take one record and then compute a distance with the other ones and then cluster them up to a certain bound of distance you're allowing. The k-nearest neighbor, just basically the same, but you just want to block your clusters to be at least of size k. And then you have canopies, which is a method where you have clusters that can overlap. That's not going to give you a partition of the data, but what you would do in either case is just do the record linkage within either your block or your overlapping cluster. So you can do that, but again, it's just if you can afford it, because it can be very computationally expensive if you have many records, and even coming up with rough distance measures for high-dimensional data can be hard, okay? So that's just an alternative. There are many good reviews about these methods in these two papers, if you want to look at them. Okay, so my summary, this is just a simple plot looking what the process is for, say, 2 data files. First step is the cleaning and standardization process, very important. Then you do your blocking, either whatever you can afford and what fits best for your application. Then you do record pair comparison, just choosing, say, a threshold or a bound of the similarity that you need to have to consider record pairs a match or not, right? So that's your classification part. You have we're going to end up with a set of matches, no matches, or possible matches depending on which probabilistic approach you're using. So references, the first 2 references here are online resources that are great. They're pretty easy to follow. You want to look at those. And then these are just the other papers that I mentioned. Thank you so much. You're not going to use this?
Yes, it's in what hand? Buenas tardes. Yesterday I talked about how we can combine registers and sample surveys to improve quality. And today I continue, and now today it is a Latin American case, and the problem is coverage errors. And this is a serious problem here in Latin America. We have visited many countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, and the countries, they want to start to use registers for statistics production, and to get the statistical population register would be a really great step forward. But there are some similar problems. First, it can be difficult to get access to the administrative registers. New attitudes, new legislation, and cooperation is necessary. But this is going on now. Cooperation is going on, and changes in legislation is being done. So when they get these administrative registers they want to use for a population register, then they find that residential addresses are not of good quality, which means that regional statistics, for instance, on municipalities, that is impossible for the moment. And that is a great pity, because one of the big gains when we use administrative data is that it opens possibilities to give detailed statistics for small areas. So we really want regional statistics when we create our registers. And to be able to create a good statistical population register, you must have access to information of good quality regarding all demographic events: births, deaths, immigration, and emigration. And then we have the biggest problem, that is migration within the country. And here we concentrate on this last issue, migration within the country. The other parts, you have administrative sources, you have nacimientos register, you have defunciones register for births and deaths. In Colombia, for instance, Dane, they get administrative data from Migración Colombia regarding immigration and emigration. So here you have administrative sources that you can use. But on the last line, migration within the country, there is lack of good quality administrative data today. To solve this problem, we propose the following method. We have two parts of the method. The first one is to combine registers and sample surveys to measure coverage errors in the population register. And after that, you can develop calibration estimators that reduce the effect of coverage errors on the register-based population statistics. And when you do this, you want something that is better than an old census plus demographic projections. So the problem is it is migration within the country causes coverage errors when we produce statistics for municipalities. And the solution to this, there are three methods that should be combined. And first of all, you must have identity numbers in the registers and identity numbers in the sample surveys, and also in the census. Then you can do exact record linkage or deterministic record linkage, as we just heard about. So, and here our advice is that in the countries we visit, you should improve your administrative system. It is the national registration system of persons that needs to be improved. And this, in the long run, this will be necessary. I mean, you must cure the disease, and the disease is bad national registration systems. But this will take years. And then we think that you could start already now and use your bad registers if you combine this with area samples and calibration estimation. So the next method you should combine first is to improve the population register as much as possible. And that you can do by using other sources and create a statistical population register with better quality. I will explain that. And the third step, develop estimation methods where the statistical register is combined with an area sample. And here we should do calibration of weights for the units in the register. Yesterday I did calibration of weights for the units in the sample. Now it is the opposite. And methods 2 and 3 here will be discussed now. And what you have in all countries in Latin America, you have population registers. You do a census every 10th year, and you have household samples you do every year. And these three sources of information, how can you combine these three sources to get a good system for producing good quality population statistics? That is what we want to investigate. And we have tested our idea with real data. And we wanted to get an answer to the question, can we actually use calibration of weights in a register? That is not done very often. And can we estimate the truth today regarding the structure of the population with a badly updated register? And the real data we tested our ideas on was, we took the Swedish population register for 2005, and we want to use that to estimate the population structure 2015. So we say this old register from 2005, that is a typical Latin American register of bad quality regarding residential addresses. And then we have the Swedish population register for 2015. That is the truth we want to estimate. So we have the data we want to use for estimation, and then we have the answer, the truth, so we can see the quality of the different estimators we will try. And here we have an example of one small Swedish municipality, 2015. If we only have our bad registro civil, then we think that 2,700 persons live in this municipality, but actually 619 persons, they have left the municipality. So here we have over coverage. And then we also have 305 persons have moved to the municipality, but that we do not know when we have this bad registro civil. So we have under coverage for these 305 persons. And net migration means that my fingers are thick today also. You see? Yes. Here we have net migration causes this error in our population estimate. This is our estimate, and this is the truth. So let us look at microdata. We have taken Statistics Sweden's population registers, all persons belonging to these registers both years. So, which means we only measure migration within Sweden. And migration means new municipality of residents. And here you see a number of persons. Here we have our typical Latin American register, Registro Civil, what we have today. And here you have identity numbers of all persons. you have the age, you have the sex, and you have the municipality code. And here we have the truth. We have done exact deterministic record linkage, and here you have the same persons. And you see here, yes, they live in the same municipalities, but here we find an error. This person have moved from municipality number 1466 to municipality number 1480, and so on. In all, we have 21% of the persons in our registro civil, they have wrong municipality. Our first estimator, that is a lazy statistician without ambitions. I take registro civil as it is. And that estimator, you can see here, in that column, here we get a table of about 300 municipalities we have in Sweden. Here you have the top of that table, and here you can compare the estimate with the true value. And here you see the absolute error in percent. And to sum up, we have the mean absolute error in percent is 4.4%, and the maximum was almost 17%. So this is the no ambitious statistician's estimator. And here we can see the quality of this person's estimator. Then we get rid of that unambitious statistician and get another one. And that person now wants to try to improve the population register and use more available sources to improve the quality of the residential addresses. And in Colombia, they have a CISPEN register, they call it. It is for administrating support to poor people. And we have found that all countries we have visited, they have similar registers. And here you go to a regional office in the municipality where you live and fill in a form with information about your identity number and your present place of residence. And if this person moves to another municipality, then a person must go to the office in the new municipality and say, hello, I'm here, I want support, and my identity number is this, and I live now in your municipality. So here in this CISPEN register, we get updated addresses, residential addresses. And they must do this to get continued support. So there is a strong incentive to update your addresses in this way. And as about half of the population is included in this poverty register, which means now if we use that register, we can improve the quality of our population register and reduce the errors with about 50%. So our statistician now does just this. So the statistician combines, here we have variables from our bad registro civil, and here we match record linkage with identity numbers, and here you have the same persons in this CISPEN register. 0 means the person was missing in the CISPEN register, but the second person with identity number 2, here we have the information, same municipality according to CISPEN and in the registro civil, so it is no problem. Here we find a person according to our bad registro civil. Person lives in municipality number 136, but according to CISPEN, the person has moved. So here you see we have exactly the information we need to improve our population register. And this combined register I call our statistical population register. And if we use this, we get a new set of estimates. Here, again, if you take that register and tabulate number of persons by this, we take the combined information from CISPEN and the old Register Civil and use these municipality codes, then we get these population statistics. And this is our second estimator, and we can compare here the estimates and see the errors. And you see exactly what I told you. The errors are now reduced with about 50%. So this illustrates that it is a very good idea to combine information in different registers to improve quality. Next step, our statistician now want to try to combine Registro Civil with an area sample, because area samples, theoretically, they have no coverage errors. In practice, there are some parts of Amazonas you do not go to, and some very high mountains you do not send your interviewers. But in theory, area samples have no coverage errors. And that quality issue we want to use to improve the quality in our register-based statistics. So if we then you must create auxiliary variables. And we have done that here. Our 290 municipalities in Sweden, we, Britt and I, have grouped into 10 categories from the most rural to the most urban. And these categories, they are the auxiliary variables we hope are strongly correlated with net migration. You remember yesterday we wanted auxiliary variables that are strongly correlated with non-response patterns and so on. And here it is the same idea. We want auxiliary variables strongly correlated with the quality problem we want to solve. So when we did that, and in the first column, now we have these 10 categories. So this now it is not one municipality, we take 10 categories, then we have about 30 municipalities in each category. So here we have actually the 30 most rural municipalities. And you see, according to Registro Civil, we have 351,000 persons that live in these 30 municipalities together. But according to the area sample, it is only 317,000 persons. And this is typical. People move from rural regions into urban regions. So then we have undercoverage in rural regions, and if you go to the bottom of the table, then we have Stockholm and the big most urban areas, the 30 most urban municipalities. Here we have 1.2 million persons according to our Registro Civil, but in reality we have almost 4 million people that live here. And here again, people move from urban to rural, which means here we have, in our Registro Civil, we have undercoverage. So, and the calibration of weights is here very easy. If I want, I can do matrix algebra and define 10 auxiliary variables and invert matrices and all that. But here we can do a simple division from a primary school. But now you can call it calibration of weights. Yeah. Tell your children when they do divisions that they do calibration of weights. So I divide the area sample with our estimate. You see, here we have overcoverage. These persons should get weights smaller than 1. We have about 10% too many persons here. So here, all persons, all 351,000 persons that live in one of these 30 municipalities, they get a sampling weight, now it is a register weight of 0.90. And if we go down in the table, we have the most urban, these 29 municipalities, all these 1,288,000 persons that live in any one of these 29 most urban municipalities, they get a weight of 1.06, because here we have under coverage of about 6%. So now I have something. What happens with PowerPoint? My charts are growing and you cannot see the text. Well. Now, here we have our data. The first columns here are our data from the bad Registro Civil, and here I have coded the municipalities. So here we have the category. So here we have the auxiliary variable that we have created, so that we have added to our bad Registro Civil. And then we have added these individual weights for each person. So in all millions and millions of records in the register, each person has now got a weight. And if you use these weights for estimation, then we can compare. Now it is a calibration estimator. And here we have our 290 municipalities. You have the top of the table, and you see now the calibration estimate is 32,936, and that is very close to the true number according to our good population register. So here you see what happened with the errors. The mean absolute error is now 0.6%, and the maximum is 6%. But you see how quality is improving, which means it pays to be ambitious. So, and next step, of course, is to combine Registro Civil and the CISPEN register and the area sample. And what happens then? Then you see our estimator becomes better and better. Mean absolute error is 0.4. I cannot see on long distance without glasses. And the maximum error is now only 3%. Yes, and the fifth estimator, we wanted to be more ambitious. We also want to produce estimates for each municipality by age group. And then we took 7 age groups, 70 estimates from the sample as auxiliary variables. When we did that estimation, well, the quality is the same, but you made me so nervous, so now I So, yes. So you see, it could be possible also to give estimates for population in each municipality by age group. And I think there's a big market for that kind of statistics. And we can look at an example. Here we have Stockholm municipality, and you see 20 to 39 years, that is when people move to some other part. And then you see in Stockholm municipality, the bad registro civil underestimates the true number of persons in these age groups. We see our calibration estimator is much better than the bad registro civil. So, I mean, the idea works also here. Here we have an exotic name, Åsele municipality. The same age groups, you see here we have the bad registro civil overestimates the truth, but our calibrated estimator is much, much better. So you see now, when we saw this, we were quite happy, and now we can say to our colleagues in Latin America, the method we propose can work. And then how to implement this method? Look at what you do today. You do a population census every 10th year, and then you do demographic projections of this up to now. But it is difficult to do good projections by municipality. I'm not friend with the system. I get my pictures are in reality much bigger, but we see we have under coverage on the screen. Yes, but you will survive. So, that part has been completely destroyed. Sabotage. Microphone. That will not make the charge better. But the traditional system, then you get census information every 10th year. I mean, it's, thank you very much. Here you have 2001, and then you have in the municipality, you can imagine a dot here. And 10 years later, you get a new dot here, 5.4% lower. So you know what happened between these years. You do not know when it happened, and you do not know what is happening now. The only thing you know that these censuses are extremely costly. Now I want to see what happens when I take next slide. Almost. Here is the yearly register-based population statistics we produce in Sweden. Then we get data every year. Dots have disappeared from. As we have, it is.
You have to slide, but you don't have the mic.
I'm brought up with these ones you have here. It is when I got desperate. Yes. Yes. Then we see every year like that. Oof. Yes, I think we have the whole chart. Now, how to implement the method, we think. You do a population census with identity numbers every 10th year. Available with registers with ID numbers are used to create a statistical population register. You combine registro civil, nacimientos, defunciones, CISPEN, and register from Migración, Colombia, or in your country, and create a statistical population register with as good quality as possible. Then you do household samples, area samples, but you have identity numbers. Then you do model-based estimation, calibration of weights. Skill is required to develop a model for net migration and also a model for this age distribution. So some important work has to be done, but you should be comforted. You only need to do better than the old census. And here, on year 1, you do a census, and you get a dot here that has disappeared. And then year 2, and when you do census, you combine the census and the registro civil, and then you get a very, very good quality registro civil. But then 1 year passes, and people move around in the country, so that register is no longer perfect. But then you take or combine that updated population register with the area samples for year 2, and calibrate, produce estimates, and then you get the dot that is visible. Next, year 3, you do the same thing. You update your population register, use your new area samples, and do a new calibrated estimation, and like that. And our conclusion is you can start now and use your administrative population registers and replace population projections with yearly population statistics based on the population samples. The references, there are students in the room. There is a book in Spanish at no cost. If you go to INEGI's homepage, I hope you will find that book. Britt and I, you could search for Wallgren, you will find it. But this book, we are the only Swedish statisticians who have published in Spanish, and we are very proud of this. And this is thanks to the work of INEGI that have made this translation possible. And also there's been quite a lot of work to get our English publisher to allow us to have this Spanish version freely available. And I think Eric sitting there has done quite a lot of work there. So thanks to INEGI, this book is freely available for everyone who understands Spanish. Muchas gracias.
Bueno, abrimos la... Muchas gracias a los dos expositores. Muy interesantes las dos ponencias. Yo me voy a tomar previo a la comida 10 minutos para hacer mis comentarios y después, si hay tiempo, haremos preguntas, ¿no es cierto? Abrimos la mesa a preguntas y respuestas. Creo que hay muchas, podría haber muchas preguntas interesantes. Estamos abiertos, ¿sí? Van a llevar el micrófono.
Emilio López, de la empresa numérica. Mi pregunta es para Brenda. ¿Puede ser en español? ¿Sí? Okay. Pensando en que tenemos que ligar, digamos, 8 bases de datos, y ese trabajo ya se hizo, y luego llegan más bases de datos, pero es la misma liga, se me ocurren 3 posibilidades, y son las que quisiera como conversar un poco a ver qué es lo más útil. Una sería juntar las nuevas bases y rehacer todo el trabajo computacional. Otro sería aprovechar ya la clasificación de los que están ligados, no macheados y probablemente macheados con las nuevas bases de datos. O la otra es hacer las nuevas bases de datos, su propio trabajo y al final unirlos. No sé qué sería lo más recomendable, o depende
Gracias.
de los datos.
Tomamos otras dos preguntas y luego respondemos. ¿Te parece? Sí.
Anders, ¿podemos prescindir de los censos?
Una tercera, Alfredo. Alfredo. Perdón.
También Anders, aunque sabemos que en Latinoamérica nos faltan todavía desarrollar muchos los registros administrativos para aprovecharlos de la manera que se hace en Suiza, en Suecia. La pregunta sería, ¿puede Suecia todavía ser mejor que lo que tiene ahora con la explotación de sus registros administrativos?
Gracias. Brenda.
Estaba pensándola, esa está buena.
¿Quieres que pasemos primero a él?
Sí, porque así no tengo que contestar porque no me da tiempo.
The last one, can Statistics Sweden do better than today? Oh yes, the answer is yes. We know what data Statistics Sweden has today, and we have 3 ideas on 3 important statistical registers that could be created with data we already have. The problem is there is no manager appointed to new survey 1, new register 2, so there are no persons who do it. So we could, perhaps we use 80% of the information we have. Of course, if you don't have a census, you can start with these ideas anyhow. It is good. I mean, census is so very extremely expensive, so if you have it, then you should use it to improve your population register. But if you don't have it, you should use nacimientos, defunciones, cispens, etc., and do as well as you can, and then use area samples and calibrate your estimates.
Yo diría que mi opción menos preferida en las 3 que me diste sería hacer el proceso de la nueva data por separado y después, ¿me entiendes? O sea, como hacer el linkage de esas y después hacer el otro proceso de linkage, porque siento que sería como incluir errores 2 veces, o sea, como que vas a tener posibles, sí, como que tus tasas podrían ser más infladas solamente porque estás haciendo el proceso 2 veces. Preferiría como que vas haciéndolo progresivo con lo que ya tienes, pues porque no vas a volver a hacer eso, ya está, e ir incluyendo la data tal vez por pedazos si puedes, de alguna forma, y así como que reducirías tus tasas de error, yo siento. Pero pues claro, depende de la aplicación, pero esa sería mi última opción.
¿Más preguntas?
Hola, mi nombre es Alejandro de INEGI. Brenda, si mal no recuerdo, en tu primer slide hablabas de la posibilidad de utilizar metodologías para anonimizar cierta información. Mi pregunta es si conocen alguna literatura que trate de vincular este tipo de estrategias con información, por ejemplo, de Big Data, donde, por ejemplo… de Big Data, donde, por ejemplo, por la granularidad con la que ya accedes a ese tipo de información, entonces es muy fácil, con muy pocas observaciones, identificar patrones e identificar ya a las personas, ¿no? Entonces, como instituto público, podría ser bastante útil dar información sin comprometer la privacidad y la identificación de las personas.
Gracias. ¿Otras preguntas? A la 1, a las 2. Acabamos con esta pregunta, Brenda.
No soy una experta en el área, pero sé, al menos en Duke, hay otros profesores, Beca sabe más de esta área de privacy, pero sé que mucha gente está usando datos sintéticos. Entonces, la idea es generar otra data nueva con datos sintéticos, donde no tienes forma de identificar a una persona únicamente, digamos, y puedes hacer tus análisis estadísticos, y después devuelves, o sea, solo hay cierta gente que conoce la data real, vuelves tus resultados y los comparan con la data real. Entonces, eso es como yo pienso lo más efectivo, pues si son datos sintéticos no hay forma de que se sepa información, si eso es lo que estás tratando de proteger.
There's a very good paper by Peter Christian that does, so what you're talking about is privacy preserving record linkage, PPRL, and there's a very good paper by Peter Christian in the Journal of Privacy and Confidentiality, I think from 2013 or 2014 with his postdoc Danusha, I'm going to butcher her last name, Betzlaten. She's the first author, he's the last author, and I can't remember, but it has PPRL in the title. But you should be able to find it. If you can't, you can send me an email.
Ok, pues la verdad es que yo quiero darles las gracias a los expositores. Estamos justo en tiempo para el lunch break y les agradezco a todos su presencia. Y pues, lo último que quisiera es entregarles los reconocimientos tanto a Anders como a Britt por parte del instituto y del CIMAT por haber participado, lo mismo que a Brenda Betancourt por haber estado aquí con nosotros en darnos estas excelentes exposiciones, y les pediría un aplauso para ellos y para todos, por favor. Gracias. Nos vemos, regresamos después del lunch.